What's up, guys? Steve Coyne here, and today we're going to go over the yoke. We're going to talk about form, there's some tips, tricks, and successful factors to help you do your best in both training and competition. Okay, so first things first is setting up your yoke for your height and your pickup. Now, this is pretty important. Of course, we want to get this right. When we're picking up the yoke, we want to balance the factors of we want to really pick it up as little as possible to conserve energy, but also enough so that the bottom of the yoke doesn't scrape the floor and that we can have our favorable, comfortable pickup stance, right? So we'll go into this in a second, but just out the gate, some heavier yokes are going to require a nice wide stance. If it's a relatively lighter yoke for you, you might be able to get away with more of a split stance where you don't need to pick it up that much and you can just get running right away, okay? But we'll get into that. What you should be doing, though, to ensure consistency in your training, your workouts, and at your competitions is you need to measure what your yoke height is, okay? And if there are differences, again, between heavier and lighter, know what they are. So for me, I know through repetition and training that my yoke height, I'm looking at the bottom here, is I'm at 50.5 inches, 50 and a half inches. Right? So that's the compromise for me where I'm picking it up as little as possible. For me, I like to use a split stance. That's why I've been using going into training just to get this started and step right away. And then also, this will mitigate any level of swinging. So the way I start, it typically swings forward just a little bit, but using my hand position and the yoke height, I'm able to corral it right away and get going. But if I'm barely picking it up off the ground, the bottom of the yoke is going to scrape for me right away and just cause a whole chain effect where it's going to wobble and go all over the place. So very important, again, because when you are doing this at competitions, the yokes could be different. You could have different slot holes at your competition yoke. So to, lock some things down, have level of certainty, and take away any sort of guesswork or questions, measure your yoke, have a tape measure in your bag, and make sure that it's always as close to your training as possible, okay? So that being said, we've talked about where the yoke is gonna go, but you need to do some trial and error to figure out what that is. Now, after you've done this a lot, you can just set up your yoke and go into it, but if you're newer to yoke, you need to find this through these methods, okay? First thing is hand position, okay? So smaller bodied people and people with better mobility, sometimes one and the same, can have a nice narrow hand placement on the yoke, okay? Now, if you're somebody that's real wide, you might not be able to get anywhere close to this. So we might have to go here. A lot of times people in World's Strongest Man, you'll see their hands are down pretty low, but I need you to consider that if you're a smaller frame person, that you don't necessarily want to mimic some people that are at World's Strongest Man doing yoke because of their body frame size and the relative size they are compared to the implement. So relatively, that implement is tiny for them, so they have to have their hands down low. Now, having your hands out to the side, what helps with this a whole lot for the whole event is if there's any sort of swinging with the yoke back and forth, you're gonna be able to lock in and push forward against these uprights to prevent that swinging, right? So that's a disadvantage here when you're up top just holding on this crossbar. You might be able to have a pretty good, nice, tight setup, but there's not a lot to prevent any swinging back and forth like this. However, play with your strengths, figure out what works for you, and there might be some differences between a heavier yoke and a lighter yoke that you may need to switch your form for. So for me, I like to get my hands relatively high, almost right under the crossbar here. This yoke bar is going to go right on the top of my traps here, just like so. Now, we want to make sure we're having a very tight setup through our whole body, and we can use our setup to do this. So as I'm stepping forward into the yoke, I'm thinking about stretching out my chest and squeezing my back muscles while keeping my posture and torso up to get into position. Okay, for me, that's sending a chain from head to toe, tight back, tight core, down. And I'm using like the actual frame here, the actual yoke to do that. So stepping forward here, back's tight. And again, mental triggers where like now I can get tight through my core, my midsection, chest is up nice and broad. Here, and get into position, okay? So whatever we're doing when we're picking up, we wanna make sure, whether it's wide stance, narrow, staggered, that we're even weight. So right now, I have a nice even line. If you were to draw a line through the center of the uprights or the crossbar and also through the center of my feet, I am centered right under the yoke with a nice, good, tall, upright posture. So, I'm not gonna have to like good morning up. We wanna make sure that we're squatting up here. If our feet are a little behind, we're gonna have to good morning it. If our feet are forward, you're gonna have to do something like rounding your back and coming up. So posture, tension first when we're picking up the yoke. Again, from here, good position, or split stance, good position, just like that. All right. Now, again, you're gonna have to test these things out on your own, but if the yoke is light enough, I didn't say light, but light enough to where you can get moving right away, you should try using a split stance so you can pick up and start moving forward right away. Now, once again, you have to balance all these different factors, such as this could cause this yoke to start swinging right away. But if your hand position and your height position is correct, that might not matter, right? There's a level where if it's so high off the ground, it doesn't matter how much it's swinging, it's never gonna touch. You should really not let that happen anyways, but play those games so you know what's gonna work for you, right? For me, I know out the gate most of the time that the back end of the yoke is going to swing a little bit if I use a split stance. However, it's much faster and it's not going to hit the ground where I set it at that 50.5 inch height before, okay? So a split stance would look like this, right? Think about a sprinter going off on blocks, how their feet are staggered. That's a little extreme example, but I'm going to come forward here and I open up with a nice wide stance here. So what that looks like, I'll show you from the front here. It's like this, but again, even weight, this actually is centered still with the uprights and the yokes. So I'm ready to take a step forward right into it. But I want you to also notice this stance here, is this allows me to pick up a nice heavy weight with my body correctly. Split stance where something like this is a weaker position than this, right? If you were gonna try to squat or leg press your heaviest weight, you're gonna go a little wider, not come in nice and narrow like this. All right, so again, use your strengths, use your strong positions, try these things out for yourselves, right? And that's also too the important point of if you're going a heavier yoke, you might need to set up wide here just to get it moving, right? A nice wide leg press, you can do a whole lot of weight. We've all seen those gym fail videos where the guys have the super wide stance and they're moving every plate in the gym for 5 inches. If that's what you need to do for a yoke, just to get it moving, great. Then step in, start moving. Now, when you're actually moving the yoke, we have to remember a few things. One, got to stay tight. You have to stay tight, head to toe. So use that trigger head to toe once you're set up. If you can get this set up correctly, it's much easier to maintain, right? So that's not only before you pick it up, but when you stand up as well, right? So you can set up real good here and then just sort of lose it. Not good, not gonna cut it. So use some triggers in your brain, whether it's packed core, tight legs. I personally like tight legs. Remember that you have to maintain that as you keep going forward. Now, you don't necessarily have to think about your physicality. You could use some cues to move you in the right direction. One of the ones that I like to give the most is hips as headlights. I forget who I heard this from first, but hips as headlights. You really want your hips to always be in the direction that you want to go. If you're out like this, whatever, that's that. If you do this correctly with your setup, you really should be pretty square from the box of your shoulders and hips. So if we can maintain that, even if you start to get a little sideways, if you can orient and correct your hips to face the direction you want to go, everything else will fall into line, right? I also like at the same time that your belt buckle, big cowboy belt buckle leads the way. If you can picture a big rodeo one here, I really like thinking about hips as headlights, cowboy belt buckle leads the way. right? So the other thing that is very important is breathing. A lot of people, for some reason, it's really because there's a lot going on, but a lot of people forget to breathe on all sorts of things. So what I would recommend at least, is to use a short, like intense, for some breathing. What is cool about that is you can get in a rhythm where you're breathing quick, you're sending signals to your whole body that you need to move quick and step quick, right? That's like not something relaxing, lackadaisical if you're breathing like that. So it's a greater signal to like your feet, like move quick with that, to do that. But also it gets your core firing really hard. If you can get like some big, deep belly breaths, you can try that for yourself right now. If you really get that violent inhale, exhale, gets your core strong. So that's another little trick you can use to like stay tight and tense while you're moving with the yoke. Okay. Now turns, depending on your event, this is something that you just need to practice, right? Like a lot of times a very, very common element is, the 50 feet down, drop, turn your body, repick, and get back under. You just need to use all of those elements that we just talked about, but you need to practice it at lightning speed, okay? So, your hand position shouldn't change. Your foot position shouldn't change. Like you should really do that all again, but you need to drill that, right? So just, know what's coming up in your competition and be ready for it. You might not even have to do any turns, or like it might just be one way for a certain event, whatever. That's up to you as the athlete to practice. But if you are doing a carry where you're going across the line, then you have to turn. Here's one of my biggest tips for that is keep a hand on the bar. So you'll be coming. There will be momentum of the yoke, most likely on the surface that you're going. So let's say I'm going to take a couple steps back. Let's say I'm coming here. I'm going to do this slow-mo. Here, I like to keep a hand on the yoke to keep me connected. And just quick turn, right? So I really like keeping one hand on it because that is just a like sensory tactile feedback device to keep me connected and also prevent me from going too far. That's it, because a lot of people will drop, run past, and then reset up versus, here, drop, all you got to do is just a little pivot on the feet and you're right back there. So, at nationals, right, the difference between first and 10th, I believe, was like 4 or 5 seconds. It was pretty close. There was a lot of people that were right in that 22 to 24 seconds. So when we're talking about transitions, just practice, master, get that down, right? But if you're good at setting up tight, you should be able to drill this faster. One thing that's really good in your training is to do some carries where you're doing a little longer distances, but you break it up into more picks if that's something that you need to do. So instead of doing if carrying the weight is no problem, you could do 100 total feet, but 20 feet down, drop, turn around, go back, 20 feet back. Same thing. So you're practicing that quick pick 4 or 5 times if that is the area of need, right? But you're still going to be getting the volume in of carries through that distance. So that's a pretty cool way to train if you need to work on that pickup, right? Other things too, run through the line, okay? A lot of times there's slide penalties because of the smooth floors and you're supposed to carry the whole implement across the line. You should never, ever, ever be guessing whether or not you cross the line. It's just that simple. So here's what you can do to avoid that. 1, be friendly and be cool. Your judge will almost certainly be cool enough if you say, will you please tell me when I'm crossing the line? Or will you please tell me when it's my time to turn? Simple enough. Now, the chances of that happening are much less if you're a giant butthole as it happens. But if that's not it, you can maybe ask a volunteer for it, somebody close by, or just watch and be 100% damn sure, okay? It's going to be faster to run through the line. As if you're running through first base, you do not have to, slide in or tag up. You can run as fast as you can through that line. So avoid a slide penalty and just run all the way through it. Maintain your speed and don't stop short just to slide it a couple inches, okay? It's just stupid to do otherwise, plain and simple, right? So those are some good success strategies for the yoke. Now, a couple things for equipment to talk about is footwear. I would really strongly recommend something with a very solid, hard sole, okay? Learning from personal experience, as many others have, is I used to do my yokes in like basketball shoes. I still do some moving events, like, you know, if I'm doing a sandbag carry or something like that, or a lighter farmers, I might do that. But I got to a point where I was having 650, 700, something like that on my back, and I felt a hard squish in my soles as I was stepping with it. So you got to think, right? If you're going to squat your heaviest, are you going to squat on a pillow that compresses and is soft, or are you going to want to squat on like a hard surface floor? Same applies to your footwear. Kind of with every strongman event, you need to find that balance of, you know, like, where am I able to like ground and put the most pressure into this? So my shoes that I like are Reebok Nanos. I've had them for about 5-6 years. They're just good athletic shoes, and they're very hard soled, okay? Some people like Nike Metcons. Some people choose lifters, but something with a hard sole, very good on that. Now, bottom up, some other things that you might want to consider. Knee sleeves, awesome, great, supportive. So are knee wraps. However, we do want some level of being able to extend and step. A yoke walk is not a straight-legged movement. So if you're choosing to do knee sleeves or knee wraps, you want to make sure that you're getting some support and not too much rigidity to where you're going to jack up something in your feet, or your legs rather, right? So don't want that. We want, you know, some degree of having some knee flexion while we're moving. Belt, I think it's an awesome idea to have a belt. Just reinforces the core bracing that you need to go head to toe strong and fast. I use soft belt, hard belt. Feels great. This is also something that can, you know, compact your breathing. That's an issue with that. So some people feel like that hurts your breathing, but I want to draw back to that point of the, you know, that's something you can practice and work with a little extra of that to keep your core engaged. What's really cool about that technique as well is when you have that reinforcement up against your core, you're going to be able to work even harder with that breath, with the belt. So you can stack your core strength up because of the breathing, because of your setup, because of the belts, right? You can actually get this to work harder for you when you do it correct. Grip shirts. I think that grip shirts are a great idea, just in case if you mispick or something, it's going to be a little, tighter on your back. Because of that, it'll grip a little better. However, it's important to know that if your yoke position is correct, you should not need a grip shirt, although it is a supplement and a benefit to have, right? It should be high on that vertical position where it's up on your traps. So there really should not be a risk of it sliding. However, use those things to your advantage for competition, right? Other than that, some people like wrist straps, elbow sleeves. I really am a fan of anything that's going to help connect in your head for full body tension. So if having like some elbow sleeves on or some wrist straps like helps you wrench in a little bit more and like tighten up like this, heck yeah, do it. Love it. Okay. That is pretty much a quick equipment overview on that. Now, cannot say this again with everything else. Practice, practice, practice. In training, yokes can be very demanding. So make sure that you find a good balance of speed work and heavy work. But even in, I think it was a Brian Alsbury and Juji Mufu video, they talked about the yoke flu. We've all had that where we do a heavy yoke or something and the next day we feel like we got sick. It's very, very, very nervous system intensive. So make sure that you are intelligently staggering, periodizing your training so that you're not just constant overload with your nervous system, right? Very important. One technique that I have used successfully with my coach, Max McCall, is staggering events. So, we might only do yoke, let's say it's an 8-week prep, right? Like every other week, like 4 weeks. But because we do yoke 1 week, sandbags the next, yoke, sandbags, I'm still getting some regular work in while keeping my body fresh to work other events, to, go heavy enough with my training instead of just doing it like every week. Other things like deloads intelligently work really well for that if you need more time under the yoke. So that is a 101 quick, good, grand overview of the yoke. As I've said before, What's the most important thing is figuring out for your body size, for your preferences, for your event, what's going to work the best. But be smart, train hard, have fun, and have a championship day.